Another day in the American experience. Another mass shooting. As probably everyone knows about what happened in Atlanta and now in Boulder, Colorado. I'm not going to get into why the shooters are still alive, especially the Colorado one who murdered a police officer who had 7 kids. I'm not going to get into that. We all know what the obvious reasons are. I'm not going to get into that right now. What I am going to get into is the fact that this is never going to stop until some people end this. Now, I'm going to read an article from John Pavlovitz about how we're getting through this coronavirus nightmare, but only to trade corona for the return to gun violence. And afterwards, I'll give you my final thoughts. 10 victims in Boulder and the 8 in Atlanta were survivors. They managed to weather the greatest public health crisis of our time, an insidious and relentless virus that for 12 months have decimated the planet and taken the lives of over 500,000 Americans with terrifying velocity and breathtaking brutality. They had to endure lockdowns, shutdowns, job losses, and they made it through isolation, fear, and grieving. They have navigated school closings and social restrictions. They had tirelessly evaded and pervasive sickness so that others, so many others, had to succumb to. As they navigated grocery store aisles and went to work and waited on vaccines and imagined a life that was heading towards something that resembled normal, they were assassinated by a heavily armed stranger who in an instant did what the coronavirus could not manage to do in 1 year: destroy them. This is because, for this nation, more than any other, that quick, senseless, self-inflicted destruction has become the norm. We've been collectively sick for a long time now. Before a single case of the virus had been diagnosed, we'd already been mortally wounded by Columbine and Sandy Hook and Charleston and Colorado Springs and Las Vegas and Orlando and Parkland and countless other mass murders, followed by a fierce flood of outrage that eventually subsided. Long before we ever knew the words coronavirus, or social distancing, or flattening the curve, we've been well acquainted with the AR-15s, God and guns, and thoughts and prayers, and the steadfast strenuous resistance by conservatives to changing anything. And after the vaccines have done their work, allowed the world to leave behind so much unnecessary death, we here in America will be adding more and more victims to a man-made disease we could not indicate ourselves from because too many of us were willing carriers of it. In the end, that's the story here, that moving forward, America's greatest threat will continue to be an inside job. When the entire world has put this pandemic in its collective rearview mirror and begun to find some normality, we'll be left by this very specific shared sickness as our default setting. We will still be a nation held hostage by a bloodlusting political party whose adoration of guns has rendered them defiantly unwilling to address their proliferation, their sadistic worship, or their contagious brutality. We will be steady witnesses, first to senseless mass executions, and then to politicians and pastors and friends who are not moved by them in the least, because to do so will not be profitable for them, nor comfortable. We will be still hopelessly afflicted with NRA zealots and thoughts and prayer pageantry and soulless gun lobbyists and complicit politicians and God and guns religious fervor and military-grade weapons and war zones and grocery stores, churches, schools, and shopping malls. And soon, the 18 beautiful original human beings whose lives were snuffed out in a millisecond in Atlanta and Boulder this week will be a barely remembered statistic, quickly replaced by more and more numbers that have names and stories and lives that will not be properly heard or grieved or respected. There will be the acceptable collateral damage of a willing addiction to plentiful tools of rapid carnage that is big business in Congress, in the pews, and in campaign coffers. The coronavirus has historically brutalized the planet, but in the end it will pale in comparison to our greed and our fear and the sickening truth that nearly half this nation's treasures guns more than people. This national epidemic will keep killing us until we stop it. First off, thanks to John for doing this. This has got to stop. This whole thing has to stop. And it's got, and this excuse of the Second Amendment has to stop. The idea that a man or woman could have an assault rifle that's mainly used for combat in the hands of underqualified civilians, it has to stop. There is no logical reason for any civilian to have an assault rifle. There is none. Competition. What competition needs to have someone with an automatic rifle? The only competitions I've ever been to when it comes to weapons have been pistols or long barrel hunting rifles, as in Winchesters. I grew up in the South, and up to this point, I have never felt any kind of fear from guns until the recent years. Not even, I grew up, I was in high school when Columbine hit. Still had no fear of guns or mass shooters. And no one is doing anything about it. Because A, they're too cowardly to do anything about it because they're worried about losing votes. Or B, and this is more to the point, they're whores for the NRA. When are you guys going to start growing some balls and doing something about this? The President of the United States wants bills in place to stop this from happening, to expand gun control. A lot of us in this country, Republicans and Democrats, a lot of us who happen to be gun owners, want this. Because it makes common sense. The two things that the Republican Party does not have. I'm still wondering why we're going through this. We suffered through a pandemic, and now this continues. What is with these people? And I don't want to hear the excuses of there's something wrong in the brain. Because we both know that's a lie. Because they're obsessed with the idea that someone's going to take their guns. We had 8 years of Obama. No guns were taken away. And about that, I'm trying not to make this into a Democrat versus Republican video, although it should be. The President of the United States, Joe Biden, spoke up. The former President of the United States, Barack Obama, spoke up. at the time of this video's posting, we haven't heard a single word from Donald Trump. And I am wondering why. No, actually, I'm not wondering why, because we all know what the whole thing is. He's still in the pocket of the NRA. He won't speak up, even when he should. If there is ever a time for a former head of state to speak up, now is the time. But Donald Trump can't even be bothered. It's not because he was banned from social media platforms. It was the simple fact that he does not, like the rest of the Republican Party, like the rest of the gun nuts out there, he doesn't give a shit about any of us. And it's time for his supporters, and it's time for the Republican Party to understand that. I would say it would be time for the Republicans to understand that, but the Republicans don't care either. Ted Cruz today in Congress, in the Senate, screamed that taking guns is not the answer. He didn't give us any kind of real answers. My heart goes out. I'm getting sick and tired of saying that. I'm getting really sick and tired of saying my heart goes out to the families of the victims. I'm tired of saying that. Because at this point, it feels like as I said as we said in the article, we're becoming numb to it. Like the loss of a life, regardless of the reasons, doesn't matter anymore. But maybe that's what happened when you have 4 years of a man who didn't cherish human life, but only by his own, unless you paid him to. I don't want to make another video like this again. I don't want to talk about something like this happening again. And the only way for that to happen is for common sense gun laws to be enacted. The Republicans don't want to help us? Fine. They can drench in blood. They can drown themselves in blood for all I care. But it's going to happen sooner or later. And these just try and come and take it BSers. Someone on Facebook said that out in the open, you can try to take my guns, but let me tell you something. Y'all give them to you barrel first. That's the kind of thinking that leads to things like this. 18 people were murdered in the span of 1 week due to gun violence. When is enough going to be enough? CTP, know the truth. God bless. Peace to the left, justice to the right.